So good day, class. So today we're going to discuss about the project classification. It is important to know the different project types and classifications. What this will be the basis where you and how you're going to charge. Okay. Then it would also provide you what you call this an idea on how complex the project that you're going to undertake. And let's read this. So, professional architectural work is classified in accordance with the degree of complexity and the creative skill required to meet the requirements of the client within technical, functional, economic, and aesthetic constraints. Based on these groupings, the corresponding scale of charges shall be prescribed in the architect's guidelines to determine the fair remuneration to the architect. Okay, so group one, so these are the buildings of simplest utilization and character, which shall include but not limited to armories, bakeries, agricultural buildings, freight facilities, hangars, industrial buildings, manufacturing or industrial plants, other similar utilization type buildings, you have the parking structures, printing plants, public markets, service garages, simple loft type buildings, warehouses, and packaging and processing plants. Okay, so those are what belongs to group 1. Then we have the group 2, which are the buildings of moderate complexity of plan and design, which shall include but not limited to art galleries, banks, financial institutions, bolodromes, call centers, churches and religious facilities, city town halls, college buildings, convents, correctional detention facilities, courthouses, nursing homes, office buildings, parks, residential condominiums, police stations, postal facilities, private clubs, publishing plants, racetracks, restaurants, retail, and schools. So those are the part of the group 2. Always remember group 1, simple, group 2, moderate. So let's move into group 3. Okay, you still have dormitories for group 2, exhibition, fire stations, libraries, malls, motels, multi-story apartments, shopping centers, shops, mixed-use buildings and welfare buildings, and other buildings of similar nature or use. Okay. Now, group 3 are buildings of exceptional character and complexity of plan. Design which shall include but not limited to the following. You have aquariums, nuclear facilities. Okay, so if you're an architect and you already got involved in a nuclear facility project, so that means that you're really very good in terms of the technical aspects of architecture and engineering. We have auditoriums, airports, breweries, cold storage facilities, telecommunications buildings, convention facilities, gymnasiums, hospitals, hotels, transport facilities, laboratories, marinas, medical offices, mortuaries, observatories, public health centers, research facilities, stadia, theaters, veterinary buildings, veterinary hospitals, other buildings of similar use or nature. Group 4, which are your residences, so single detached, single attached, or duplex, row houses or shopping houses, or shop houses, small apartment houses, and townhouses. We have here the group 5, which are the monumental buildings and other facilities, such as exposition and fair buildings, mausoleums, memorials, monuments, specialized decorative buildings, museums, buildings of similar nature or use. We have here group 6, which are projects where the plan and design and related contact documents are reused for the repetitive construction of similar buildings without amending the drawing and the specifications. So there are cases like this, class, when your plan and design and also the related contact documents are used repeatedly in different sites. Okay. Then we have here group 7 for the housing projects, which involves the construction of several residential units on a single site with the use of one set of plans, design specifications, and related documents. We have here group 8, which are the projects involving extensive detailing such as designs for built-in components or elements, special fittings, screens, counters, architectural interiors, and development, planning, and or design. You have the group 9, which is alterations, renovations, rehabilitations, retrofit and expansion, additions to existing buildings belonging to groups 1 to 5. You have the group 10, so their opinion or give advice, clarifications, or explanations on technical matters pertaining to the architectural works. Okay, now that we are done with that, let's move on to the method of compensation. Okay, so compensation is based on the architect's or the architectural firm's talents, skills, experience, imagination, and on the type and level of professional services provided. So compensation for regular design services may be based on one or more of the following. Okay. So why is it that there's this statement last that our compensation is based on your experience, skills, and imagination, talent for the okay, based on talent, skills, experience, imagining type of level of professional services provided. Okay. So once you my experience class is that in your first 10 years you really have to find you really have to build a very strong portfolio. Okay, so you need to expose yourself to different project types. You need to move out of your comfort zone. So that means you should experience not only doing residential buildings but other project types as well. Okay, it would be good for you once you get your license to not only focus here in Cagayan de Oro but move to bigger cities as well so that you can be able to experience on how they build their and how they design their buildings. Especially if okay, so you really need to experience class how how it's like to practice in other places as well. You see a lot of buildings, get exposed to different mentors, get exposed to different colleagues as well. Then you also need to continuously improve yourself by learning new things. You could get a master's degree, and after that, you get a doctor's degree. Okay? So don't stop learning. Always read. So it doesn't mean that the only way to learn is to study, is formal education. You, as long as you always read, then you always try to improve your craft. I think you you'll be able to charge well when you practice and establish your firms already. So the methods of compensation, the first one is the percentage of project construction cost. So the architect's fee based on the PPC shall be detailed in the architect's guidelines. Then we have here the multiple of direct personal expenses. Okay. So this cost-based method of compensation is applicable to non-creative works such as accounting, secretarial research, data gathering, preparation of reports, and the like. So the methods of compensation is based on technical hours spent, does not account for creative work since the value of creative design cannot be measured by the length of time the designer spent on his work. So the computation is made by adding all cost of technical services, man hours times rate, then multiplying it by a multiplier to cover overhead and profit. And the multiplier ranges from 1.5 to 2.5 depending on the office setup, overhead experience of the architect, and experience of the architect and the complexity of the project. So other items such as cost of transportation, living and housing allowances of foreign consultants, out of town living and housing allowances of the local consultants and the like are all to be charged to the client. At the start of the commission, the architect shall make known to the client the rate of professionals and personnel who will be assigned to the project and the multiplier that has to be applied before agreeing on the method of compensation. So this is the formula. Assuming that A is equal to architect's rate per hour, then C is the consultant's rate per hour, then T is equal to the rate per hour of technical staff, researchers, and others involved in the project. So AN, CN is the number of hours spent by the architect, consultants, and technical staff. M is the multiplier, 1.5 to 2.5, and R is the reimbursable expenses such as transportation, housing, living allowance of consultant, transportation per dime, housing and living allowance of local consultants, technical staff assigned to places over 100 kilometers from area of operation of the architect. So the cost of printing extra set of drawings, reports, maps, contract documents over the 7 copies submitted to the client, overseas and long distance calls, technical and laboratory tests, licenses, fees, taxes, and similar cost items with the project. So the direct cost is EN plus CN plus TN. Then the fee is the direct cost multiplied by M, so the multiplier. Then the total cost of service to the client is equal to the fee plus R. Okay. Then you also have the professional fee plus expenses. So this method of compensation is frequently used where there is continuing relationship involving a series of projects. So it establishes a fixed sum over and above the reimbursement for the architect's technical time and overhead. An agreement afford on the general scope of the work is necessary in order to set an equitable fee. Then you have the lump sum or fixed fee. So this method will be applied to government projects since they entail more paperwork and time-consuming efforts. You have the per diem honorarium plus reimbursable expenses. So in some cases, a client may request an architect to do work which will require his personal time, such as attending project-related meetings, conducting ocular inspection, conferring with others regarding prospective investments or ventures and the like. So for these particular activities, the architect as agent of the owner be paid on per dime and honorarium basis plus out-of-pocket expenses such as but not limited to travel, accommodations, and subsistence. Then we also have the mixed method of compensation. So the SPP provides more than one method of compensation of project. So each project should be examined to determine the most appropriate method of compensation. So it's really up to you, class, on the type of how you're going to be compensated for a certain project. So you can mix these things, whatever you think is equitable for you, okay, and whatever the client will agree upon. So these are the owner's responsibilities to provide full information to the requirements of the project. Okay? Then, when necessary, designate a representative authorized to act on its behalf. Promptly examine other decisions pertaining to documents submitted by the architect to avoid unreasonable delay in the progress of the architect's works. The owner should issue orders to the general contractor only through the architect. Okay? So this clause here, the owner's responsibilities, please familiarize yourselves with it and place this in your service contracts with the owner and explain to them what are their responsibilities as well. Furnish or direct the architect to obtain at his expense a certified survey of the site as may be required, topographical and relocation surveys covering grades and lines of streets, alleys, easements, encroachments, and related information, boundaries with dimensions, and complete data pertaining to existing buildings, structures, trees, plants, water bodies, wells, excavations, pits, etc., and other improvements, and full information as to the available utility service lines, both public and private, zoning compliances, clearances, deeds of restrictions, encumbrances, and annotations to the titles, association guidelines and standards, and soil investigations, tests, borings and test pits necessary to determine soil and subsoil conditions, promptly pay for architectural and all other engineering and allied services required for the project, pay for the design and consulting services on acoustic, communication, electronic, and other specialty systems which may be required for the project, arrange and pay for such legal auditing, insurance, counseling, and other services as may be required for the project, pay for all reimbursable expenses incurred in the project as called for in Section 7, other condition services, and all taxes including VAT but not including income tax that the government may impose on the architect as a result of the services rendered by the architect on the project, whether the services are performed as a natural person, an individual practitioner, or as a juridical entity, the sole proprietorship, partnership, or corporation. And if the owner observes or otherwise becomes aware of anything that may impair the successful implementation of the project, he shall give prompt written notice to the architect. Okay. So the other conditions on services. So the conditions for the architect's fee, that the architect's fee is based on the project construction cost, where the architect has to render additional services, additional compensation shall be required. Other services Other services may be needed in order to complete the project, such as services of acoustic and illumination engineers, specialists, mural painters, sculptors, and other service providers are to be recommended by the architect for the owner's approval. Cost of for these services are to be paid for separately by the owner and shall be subject to a coordination fee payable to the architect. Scale models, 3D models, and walkthrough presentations. Should the scale model, 3D model, and/or walkthrough presentation of the architect's design be necessary, they are to be recommended by the architect for the owner's approval. Costs for the services are to be paid for separately by the owner and shall be subject to a coordination fee payable to the architect. The per diem and traveling expenses. So a per diem plus traveling and living expenses shall be chargeable to the owner whenever the architect or his duly authorized representative is required to perform services at a locality beyond 50 kilometers from his established office as it appears in the architect's letterhead. Then you also have the extra sets of contract documents. The owner shall pay the architect for additional sets of contract documents. Okay. And you also have the change order by the owner. The architect renders additional professional services due to changes ordered by the owner after approval of the architect's output. The owner shall pay the architect for extra time, resources, drafting, or other office expenses. So I think this is only fair class. So if you already agreed upon a certain project and it's already approved, then the owner decides to add some more. So of course the owner should pay for it. Then a work suspended or abandoned. If the work of the architect is abandoned or suspended in whole or in part, the owner shall pay the architect for the services rendered corresponding to the amount due at the stage of suspension or abandonment of the work. The primary service of the architect is the preparation of architectural plans, designs, specifications, and other building construction documents. So these are sets of detailed instructions that shall serve as the basis for the general contractor to implement the project. So once the architect has prepared all these documents, the architect has completed the detailed design and contracts documents phase of his services, which is equivalent to 90% of his work. So when the owner therefore fails to implement the plans and documents for construction as prepared by the architect is entitled to receive compensation, the sum corresponding to 90% of the architect's fee. So for different periods of construction, if portions of the buildings are erected at different periods of time, thus increasing the construction period and the architect's burden services, charges pertaining to services rendered during the construction phase shall be adjusted proportionately. So when the suspension of construction exceeds a period of 6 months, the fee for the remaining works shall be doubled. Then the services of specialist consultants. If the owner requires the services of specialist consultants, they shall be engaged with the consent of the architect. The cost of their services shall be paid for separately by the owner and should not be deducted from the architect's fee. And for separate services, should the owner require the architect to design movable or fixed pieces of cabinets and other architectural interior elements, site development plan components, urban design elements, and other items of similar nature, the owner shall pay the architect in addition to the architect's fee. The compensation shall be based on the project construction cost as provided under SPP document 20. So for full-time construction supervision, upon recommendation of the architect and with the approval of the owner, full-time construction supervisors, as will be deemed necessary, shall be engaged and paid by the owner. If no project or construction manager is present, the full-time construction supervisor shall be under the technical control and supervision of the architect and shall make periodic reports to the owner and to the architect regarding the progress and quality of the work done. Then the estimates, any SPCC or any cost estimate submitted by the architect can attain only a certain degree of accuracy. As the architect has no control over the cost of labor and materials or the factors that may go into competitive bidding, he does not assume any professional responsibility for such cost estimates unless glaring errors or discrepancies are clearly evident. Then the architect's fee is a net amount. Any tax exclusive of income tax that the national and or local governments may impose on the architect as a consequence of the services performed for the project shall be paid by the owner. ownership of documents. So all designs, drawings, models, specifications, other contract documents, and copies thereof, prepared, duly signed, stamped, and sealed, and furnished as instruments of service, are the intellectual property and documents of the architect, whether the work for which they were made is executed or not, and are not to be reproduced or used on other work except with the written agreement with the architect. So this is in section 33 of RA 9266. For the cost records, during the progress of work, the owner shall furnish the architect a copy of the records of expenses being incurred in the construction. Upon completion of the project, the owner shall furnish the architect a copy of the summary of all costs of labor, services, materials, equipment, fixtures, and all items used at and for the completion of the construction. For the design and placement of signs, all signboards of the general contractors, subcontractors, jobbers, and dealers that may be placed at the project site during the progress of construction shall be approved by the architect as to size, design, and contents. After the completion of the project, the owner or his building lessee shall consult the architect for the design, size of all signboards, letterings, directories, and display boards that will be placed on the exterior or public areas attached to the building project. In order to safeguard the owner's interest, nothing shall be installed inside or outside the building that would compromise its safety and aesthetics. So let's go to the project construction cost. So the project construction cost, as herein referred to, means the cost of the completed building to the owner. So including the structure, plumbing, sanitary and electrical fixtures, mechanical equipment, elevators, escalators, air conditioning system, fire protection system, alarm and clock system, communications and electronic system, elements attached to the building, and all items indicated in the plans, designs, drawings, and specifications prepared by the architect and his consultants. The construction cost of other items planned and designed by the architect, such as architectural interiors and site development plan elements, and other items of similar nature additionally planned designed by the architect, are also part of the PCC. So the cost of materials used and the labor for the installation are part of the PCC. If these items are furnished by the owner below its market cost, the cost of the material and labor shall nonetheless be computed on the basis of the current and fair market value cost. So the PCC does not include any of the fees for the architect, the engineer, the specialized consultants, and salaries of the construction inspectors. So this is important to note, class, especially in your contracts. Okay. So if the building costs around 10 million or 20 million, it does not include the fee. So the fee is separate from it. Okay. It's important that you explain that to your client at the earliest possible time. Then the project development cost. Project development costs include the cost of the construction as well as all professional fees, permits, clearances, and utilities and cost of acquiring the project site, lot, cost of money, etc. Okay, so I think this is already for UP document 203. Okay, so we are done with 202 class. So next meeting, we'll discuss about UP document 203. So I think the first uh, the first 10 years of your career slash as after passing the board exam, some of you might find it quite hard to be frank with the client regarding your professional fees. But you really have to learn how to present yourself and how to know and how to show your worth for the project. So if you have any questions, clarifications, or queries, don't hesitate to contact or email me anytime or send a message in Facebook. I'll always reply, class, especially if it's about our lessons. As these are really important. Okay, so since you're in a pandemic, it will be really hard to do this to teach you classroom setting. I think I'm more comfortable if I teach you this in the classroom setting compared to just recording or talking about it in Zoom. Okay. So if you have any clarifications class on any of the provisions, please do send an, a message or write something on our Facebook page. So for now, familiarize yourselves with the different groupings, classifications, and the different manner of what you call asking for professional fees. So see you next week, class. Stay safe. We'll post our activities in our group Facebook page.